family out there. Live 97.5 family. Just for y'all to know, just to preface this, so we have on the line with us, on the live line. This brother did a song with Grandmaster Cat and Grandmaster Melly Man. Come on, man. I don't know anybody else that's done a song with them two. Hey, could you correct me if there were?
Not really, man. I believe Macklemore did a song with them, but he had some major label help to get them. I did it on a shoestring budget, probably 10, 15 years before he did. So yeah.
Yeah. See.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, man. So the brother, again, let him know you have a YouTube channel, which you have the Hip Hop Foundation, Hip Hop History. I mean, you talk about a lot of times we go back as far as maybe Run DMC.
Right.
Most people, they forget about we talked about it
last
last week.
You're looking at me.
Because we talked about the
right.
Sugar Hill Gang,
right.
Master Flash, and Furious
from that
5,
era.
Cold Crush,
right?
B. Lou is and from that era.
Correct.
DJ B. Lou, Bubba Lou,
right?
He's from that era.
Yes, sir.
So and Quan has a plethora of information and videos. So let them know where they can find it at, Jay.
Yeah, you go to Foundation Hip Hop. If you search YouTube for Foundation Hip Hop, or just put in J. Quan and Hip Hop, either one, that'll pop up. But Foundation Hip Hop is the channel on YouTube, and you can see, I call them lessons. They're actually little mini documentaries about some of the artists you named, Spoonie G, the Crash Crews, the Busy Beats, a lot of the cats that was around before rap records.
Right.
And the interviews, live interviews there, because of COVID, I started converting everything to live interviews. The written interviews, documentaries, a lot of information.
Yeah, do that.
Yes, sir.
I'm telling you,
you hit my channel.
You'll be up a few hours watching them. I'm telling you.
Oh, hey, I love history.
Yeah. And he definitely he gets it right from the source.
Right.
Yes, sir. Definitely.
That's New York.
Yeah. Hey, Jay, one of my favorites, man. When you had Just Ice, man.
Oh, Just Ice was wild.
Oh man, yes indeed. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that was a challenge for me. I tried to navigate it as I could, but
right.
Justin, he's real, man. How you saw him is how he is. So
yeah, definitely gangster. One of the first gangsters on rap.
There you go. Definitely early.
Yeah, early, man. So let's talk about it, man. Again, we lost another legend, man. Ecstasy from Houdini. Actually, we had him scheduled to come on the show before the COVID hit.
Wow.
And then we just, because of time and different things, because we only come on Sundays 4 to 7, so it was kind of tough for him to get that in. And we could have pre-recorded it, but we wanted him live, and somebody like that. We don't want him pre-recorded, interview. So, but again, it didn't work out, and then to hear his passing, man, it was just like devastating, man. Because as you know, Houdini, I mean, B. Lou, that's his second favorite group. We just talked about this literally last week on the show. Last week.
Wow.
And it's like, man, B. Lou's first person I hit and thought about. I was like, yo, I can't believe this. So, man, just talk about the impact, man, of Ecstasy and Houdini.
Well, they're an incredibly underrated group. I think the word underrated is becoming overrated. People say everybody's underrated, but truly, in the whole thing, first, officially platinum group in this genre of music. The Fresh Fest tours where, the legend, the Sea of Fat Boys, UTFO, Run DMC, Houdini, Nucleus, all on the same stage, all, at their apex was a great thing. It was a magical thing, but I think the thing that separated Houdini from everybody else was, everybody else that we went to see at that age, in the mid-'80s, they looked like us as far as how they dressed and their attitude and everything else. Houdini, even though they were the same age as their contemporaries, they didn't look like them. I mean, my mom liked Houdini, and she wasn't a huge fan of rap by any means, but these cats could have easily fit in on stage with Frankie Beverly and Maze. I mean, Ecstasy was the branding before there was branding. The leather Zorro hat, the leather shorts. I was watching some old Soul Train clips, and they're talking to Don Cornelius, and they were a group that always had a positive message. The most risky they might have got is I'm a hoe, and if you go listen to the lyrics, I'm a hoe, they're tame by comparison to what you hear today on the radio. During the day, it's all friends growing up. All of those songs contain, One Love, always a good social message without being being corny on the delivery. Like I said, the visuals of it, you felt like you were looking at stars when you saw those guys. And musically, the late great Larry Smith, he produced Run DMC's first two albums and produced Houdini's second, third, and fourth. And for that cat to be able to give Run DMC the hard edge stuff that he gave them, and he gave Houdini actual musical compositions to rap over, it was just the planets came together for that group. One of the most probably unique groups, especially for that time in the genre, man.
Yeah, definitely, man. Hey, just real quick, because I saw a post that you made on Facebook. Hey, you were part of the Two Deaf Crew.
Yeah, the Two Deaf Crew was named the group that I was in. And we got together 86, 87, we formed. And, long story short, we used to open up for a lot of those groups. At the height of everything, by the time the Def Jam tour and all those things were happening, 87 or so, we were opening it up for, Public Enemy, Rakim, so, it's interesting for me. I was in the 10th grade, but, my reality was, having a job after school, but doing shows to promote a record that we had just made. So, I met, first time I met Houdini, I was 16. I think I put a picture up of me, Ecstasy, and some more people in front of their hotel room. And then, I've seen them several times throughout the years, just in passing, and, my thing as a historian or whatever. And I saw him last year at the Run DMC concert, and I think it was in Raleigh, North Carolina. He was the picture of health, man. It looked like and I told him, I said, you've been hitting the weights, because, he was buffed and everything. This one really hit me, it hit me from way from the left, man. Really surprised me, man. It took the wind out of me a little bit. That's, incredible group, and had a real impact, on those of us from our generation.
Yeah, definitely, man. I mean, you look at all that, man. Shoot,
Oh, man.
My joint is Big Mouth. I can say that from beginning to end, word for word. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Big Mouth, man. Funky beat. Friends.
5 minutes of funk.
5 minutes of
man.
funk. Like you said, I'm a whole. You mentioned that one earlier, man. Even the Magic Wand, with that was a little controversial because at that time in New York, Mr. Magic and Bally Mall, on BLS and on Kiss, you had Red Alert, Chill Out, and the boys over there. So they didn't play the joint. You know what I mean? Because they're like, how you gonna do a joint for Mr. Magic?
It was free advertisement for their competitor. Right.
Exactly, man. But just incredible impact they had, and a lot of, like you mentioned, them being underrated and underappreciated when we talk about the foundation and those who made that impact. And the Fresh Fest, that was just, that was like, wasn't that like the first national hip hop tour?
Once the industry was formed, I'd say it was. Sylvia Robinson, she had the Sugar Hill Review. And, she had the Funky 4+1 sequence, Sugar Hill Gang, Grandmaster Flash, and Appearance 5. But that was so early, you had to be of a certain age to catch it. Luckily for me, I was like maybe 10, 11 years old when those concerts were happening. And, my parents would allow me to go out to those concerts, when they hit. But a lot of people, they missed that series of concerts because it was just so early in the game. So once the industry was established, the first big tours were definitely the Fresh Fest. That's watch Fresh Fest, man. Jermaine Dupri used to be a dancer for Houdini. If you go back and look at the Freaks Come Out at Night video, you'll see him dancing, and that was where he got his foot in, and became an executive after being a dancer for Houdini. You'll see all of that. If you look at the Freaks Come Out at Night video, you'll see footage of like TFO, and it was actual backstage footage from the Fresh Fest. And just for our generation, if you had to be there. If you were there to witness that, it was magic. To see Buffy from the Fat Boy, rest in peace to him, on stage doing the human beatbox. To hear that in the Coliseum is just so much different than hearing it on record. And just mentioning those groups, I was saying on social media, the day that he passed, that I just was thinking about him the week before. And I was thinking about, I said, wow, Houdini is one of the few groups from the Fresh Fest era that still has all their members. Run DMC doesn't have Jam Master Jay anymore. UTFO doesn't have the educated rapper. Even going a little further, the Beastie Boys, they lost a member. All those big groups from that time, lost a member. I was like, wow, Houdini's one of the few that still has all the original members. And then the next week it's like, wow, that's not even a reality. So the brother wasn't but 56. So that really hits close to home, man. It makes you think about your own mortality.
And it definitely does, especially someone who. We looked up to, you talked about his physical appearance, how he didn't look sickly or we didn't hear
Not at all.
anything or any terminal illness or anything like that,
No,
and
no.
for it to happen the way it did, and then we keep pointing to 2020. It's like, man, again, here we go again.
Yeah.
And
Oh man.
it's just been this has been tough on everything and everybody. Um,
Yeah.
look, and why I got you here? Look, we've been on and just out of the blue, I don't know, one day, because I tagged you in a couple of joints on Facebook about the
Or the MC,
yeah,
the MC joints you did. Yeah.
yeah, and it was just something like, it's crazy how the universe works, because now I see that like everywhere. Everybody's doing all these different music groups that I'm in. Their greatest or their top five or whatever. Of course, that's something that we do that in hip hop debate, have arguments. That's the the
Sure.
sport of hip hop. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But just real quick, give me a top. And it's always hard to do it because when you've been in the game so long, when you've been around it so long, it's almost like you got to do it by era.
Yeah, you
You know
really
what
do
I'm
almost.
saying? Yeah. So for that era, during that time, give me your top five during that '80s era.
But yeah, I say for the '80s decade, I'd say probably it's hard, man. Definitely Rakim rates very high for me. Um, I'm in the cast that are very, very lyrical. So Rakim, Kane, G-Rap rate very high with me. Um, wow. Melly Mel was earlier, but his influence was so great on the next generation that I can't. It's hard for me to do a top five at all without putting him in there. The last verse of the message, and the white lines, all the metaphor. Everybody that's our favorites, was kind of influenced by Mel. So Mel would be the fourth one. And man, from that time in the '80s, I'd probably say, man, like somebody from the Treacherous Three, either like Kumo D or Special K. But the thing is, man, the difference is, man, and even Special K's brother Tila Rock, during that time they were kind of changing the game with their style. And then I didn't even mention LL, and it's really, lyrically it's hard. People forgot because he did so many R&B type records and he became a sex symbol. But those first 2 or 3 albums, lyrically, I mean, he was. He was a little different than his contemporaries what he was bringing lyrically. So you made a good point. Just 5, this thing has been recorded rap has been in existence for 40 years. It's been 4 decades. So to say that top 5 ever, if you've been aware of this music since its inception, it's really hard to pick 5 over a 40-year time span. It would almost be better to say for each decade almost, because the music used to change a couple times every decade. So yeah, I didn't even mention Chuck D. You got to put Chuck D has a very different style. So you got that. My group of people was more lyrical, but then there are cats that weren't as lyrical, but their influence in other ways was just great. Like Run DMC. They were never what we call lyrical as far as like a Kane. They're or KRS or anything like that. Their name doesn't come up in those conversations. But as far as impact, who didn't want to be like Run? Uzi, the impact of Run DMC was great. Houdini, impact was great. It's a lot to those lists, man. My lists are not surface. There's a lot that goes into them. If when I participate in those conversations.
Yeah, indeed. I tell you, another cat, man, that slept on back in the early '80s, man, was Spoonie G. That was one of my cats right there, man.
Oh, 100% out of the gate. Spoonie G, one of the great storytellers. Almost every record was, about him driving down the street in an expensive car, trying to holler at a chick. But the way his cadence and everything, he was an early member of the Treacherous Three. Treacherous Three is a very underrated group. He was in the Treacherous Three before Special K got in. So, the Treacherous Three, they never had any really big hit records, but very influential amongst MCs, man. But yeah, definitely Spoonie G.
Just real quick, talk about, I know it's kind of going off kilter, but why I got you, and we talking about the '80s, and then like transitioning, because we saw an era. We talk about the golden era. I'm actually doing a piece right now on my website, and I'm gonna tag you in it once I get it completed. But I'm doing a segment, a piece talking about the golden age, but the 2 particular years, '88 and '98. And I look at them kind of like the bookends of the golden era. You can kind of say the golden era started in '86, '87, but I'm gonna say '88 because that was like when you really started to see.
Oh, that was an incredible year. There's a lot of albums, a lot of classics dropped that year.
Mm-hmm. And then '98, it was just kind of like, when someone's about to pass, and right before they pass, a lot of times they get a breath of life. It's like, man, they were just about to, man, they were perky and this, and then they were getting better, and then they passed. And it's almost like that with hip hop. It was like right before Nas said hip hop was dead, as we knew it, and '98 was like, I mean, it was real impactful. A lot of joints dropped in '98, so it was kind of doing like a versus. With my articles, book ends, but it's a versus '98 and '88. And so, what do you think about the because I hear I'm an East Coast cat to the fullest, and it took me a while to get into the NWAs, Snoops, and all them.
Same here.
I finally got on board with them, but never could get into the down south. Every couple of Ludacris, Outkast. I really couldn't get heavy into the cats.
Same here.
Yeah, okay, my man. But what do you think about the impact that the West Coast had on hip hop, particularly when NWA came through the late '80s and then right on through the early '90s?
Yeah, well, they changed the landscape, man. That and it was I did a piece on my YouTube channel, and it was called the history of West Coast rap recordings. And they were making records early on, as early as really '80, '81, but they started making a little noise '82, '83, and you had like Ice-T, who's originally from New York, but Egyptian Love and all those guys kind of predate the NWA. And for me, when NWA came out, I was already familiar with the World Class Wrecking Crew. So when they first came out, it wasn't that I didn't believe that they were what they said they were, but I knew that, okay, that's Yella and Dre from the World Class Wrecking Crew. They made like a lot of R&B, so they made Turn Out the Light like right before they made Straight Outta Compton. So I wasn't one of those who was like, oh, this is reality rap, this is the streets. I kind of saw it as, okay, this is their way in, to get some cash. Even Ice Cube, I knew his name from a record called A Cabbage Patch that Dr. Dre had made, and Ice Cube wrote it. And then Ice Cube had a group called CIA who had a song called My Posse. So, I wasn't familiar with Eazy-E, but everybody else I knew from other affiliated West Coast groups. So to answer your question, I think they changed the landscape in a couple ways. I think they took the attention off of the lyrical content, and even before they came out, when people talked about where they were from, like you had Cutmaster DC, you had Brooklyn's in the house. So you start having the regional records where the different boroughs might make a song about their borough, and those records were there. But when they came in and said they were from Compton, what they kind of did was their thing was, this is what goes on in the streets of Compton, whatever. So I think what they did, I'm trying to word this carefully because I don't want to make it appear that I'm saying that they lowered the bar. They changed the bar where you outside of Ren, you rarely heard them talk about how good they were on the mic. It was always some social, thing tied to their thing. And I think that opened the door for the South, the Midwest, and other people to say, well, hey, look, I'm from here, and this is how it is here. And then, I'm from these projects. So I think they changed the course of the conversation from I'm the best on the mic, I'm this, I'm that, the metaphors and all that, to this is the reality of where I'm from. I think that's what they bust through the door with. Too Short early on was repping for the West Coast. Even in the days before he was doing his stuff on Jive Records, Life is Too Short and all that. He had his own independent thing before that. He was influenced by the Spoonie G's and those guys. So, they definitely, the West Coast had been in there for a minute.
I just want to get your thoughts on that just real quick because I think that when we talk about '80s hip hop and when they came, like you said, it changed hip hop and the sound and how we did it forever because you hardly heard any cursing on records and they came in right during the time where the native tongue were at their peak, and they kind of like it changed. You know what I'm saying?
They changed the game a couple times because they changed it that first time in the production. If you listen to the production Dre and Yella were doing on Straight Outta Compton, it was very much like what the East Coast was doing. It was samples and stuff. They rhymed over the same drums and the same loops. Listen to Express Yourself. You listen to that. It's like an East Coast rap record. Samples and everything is the same thing. It sounded like from the Bomb Squad.
Yep.
But Dre changed the game again when he dropped the Chronic, and what he did at that point was, I say the Chronic is when the Chronic and a little before that, N Words for Life. When NWA dropped N Words for Life, the production on that was kind of like a precursor to what we would see with the Chronic. And I think the West Coast finally had their identity, where it was that G-funk and instruments as opposed to samples, and that's when it was like, okay, we don't gotta sound like the East Coast no more. We're gonna get Stan the guitar man and these musicians to come in, and it gave them identity where they didn't sound like the East Coast anymore. So I think that was their contribution, man. Very musical, and that still stands today. If you really look at mainstream rap music, you don't hear a lot of sample-based music anymore, hardly any in mainstream. Everything is is a band, and I think that the Dre was very instrumental in introducing that back into the music.
Yeah, definitely. You're right, because even EPMD, who predated NWA, they had a little funk in it, and X-Clan did, even De La Soul with Me, Myself, and I with Prince Paul, but and again, it was more of the mainstream, George Clinton stuff we were really familiar with, but like you said, Dre went a little deeper with it.
He did. Yeah, instead of just sampling the Funky Worm, he got somebody to replay something that felt like the Funky Worm. But you make a very good point. EPMD had a lot of funk. When they came out with more, with You Got to Chill, it was more Bounce to the House, which is that affiliates of George Clinton and Funkadelic. So yeah, everybody was on. East Coast was already on the Funkadelic thing. Like you said, X-Clan definitely. Some of their biggest records were funk based. But when Dre came, instead of just looping samples, he came and he had an actual band play those funk records. So yeah. That was the difference.
Yeah. My man, Quan, Hip Hop Historian, again, appreciate you for stopping through, good brother, and sharing your wisdom and knowledge with the family, and again, sharing with us, again, mourning and giving kudos and props to Ecstasy for Houdini, brother.
Yes, sir. And to everybody, like I said, Foundation Hip Hop is the page. If you go, I think the last thing that I uploaded was the day that Ecstasy died. I took a piece from my Rakim lesson, and I was talking about flow. And if there's anything I like, I wouldn't want to leave here without saying, Ecstasy was an early flower on the mic. He didn't get a lot of credit for it. But it's only like a 2-minute piece. It's an excerpt from my Rakim piece where I talked about flow, and I mentioned Ecstasy. And everybody can check that out. If you listen to his cadence and how he rhymed, Jaleel was the writer in Houdini. He wrote a lot of the lyrics on some of the bigger songs. But one thing that Jaleel said is that before he went to lay his vocals, he would get Ecstasy to lay everything to get a reference track, because the way that Ecstasy's flow was, it inspired Jaleel to flow. A lot of cats can write, but they can't really flow. And Ecstasy flowed almost like a musician. Discos don't open till after dark, and it ain't till 12 when the party really starts. He had a very unique voice, and the flow of it was very on point, very in the pocket.
Yeah, he was riding that beat, man. I love him.
He was riding.
He riding like that, man. That's one thing that go back and listen to. I'm gonna tell you, one of the joints you mentioned them earlier about Run DMC, particularly Run, man, on Run's House.
Oh man,
listen to that and Beats to the Rhyme. Them two joints, man. Yo, that cat.
It's so funny you say that, because on my Run DMC piece on my YouTube, I talk about his style on those two songs. It's like this double word thing he was doing, or like multi-syllabic thing. Once again, my friend, not a trend, but then they said rap was crap. I mean, everything he did was double all the way through on Run. The Ruler came with a cooler name, made you dance and prance and throw the fans and sing. He was Run, my son, #1 for fun. Not a gun is done to get spun by none.
Come on, baby. Oh, no, wax attachment, attachment. Come on, baby. Run is slept on, man. Run was my guy, man.
And this is the same guy that said 2 years ago, a friend of mine. I mean, people sleep on Running Them because, once they made the records with Aerosmith and they got, so huge, and then they dropped with Tougher Than Leather.
Right.
And, by the time it came out, the new school had come up because they had like a little back and forth with Profile. So their record got held up. And then the movie was, Tougher Than Leather wasn't what we wanted from in a movie. So they kind of dropped the dud movie. And even though the album Tougher Than Leather had 4 or 5 really good songs, Run's House and Beats to the Rhyme being 2 of them, it was still perceived by the public as a dud, because now we have Public Enemy, Big Daddy Kane, the whole Juice Crew.
That's 88.
So people
that's what I'm talking about.
Kind of forgot about Running Them.
And that's what I'm talking about. That dropped in 88, and that was that year when we just flooded everybody.
Yeah. 88 was that year. I mean, everybody had Ultramagnetic, PE, EPMD, everybody had like a lot of people, their best album, a lot of those groups, their best albums dropped in that year. You know, that might have been the year that Follow the Leader came out. I think everybody was putting their best out in that year.
Yeah, it was. And then you mentioned earlier, you know, you had you mentioned Too Short, also NWA, you know, straight out of Compton, Ice-T, Power, you know, and
oh man, man. 88 was the year the planets was aligned in that year. I think as far as albums go and the uniqueness of the groups, you know, you had somebody on one side of the spectrum like that was as out there as the De La Soul, and you had somebody as street as the NWA, and you come back and you got somebody as lyrical as the EPMD with their, you know, the way that they presented, and then political sides you had PE, and man, 88 was and then, you know, I'm pretty sure
Slick Rick.
KRS dropped something in 88, right? Was that the year that the Philosophy album came out on Means? I'm not sure, but
by all means,
all means, there you go. So yeah, man, what a year.
Yeah, crazy. Then you had sleepers. You had sleepers like Super Lover, seeing Casanova Run.
Casanova Run, definitely.
So MC Light dropped that year with her first joint. So
sure did.
It was crazy, man. It's crazy.
Yeah,
yeah.
It really was.
Again, appreciate you, good brother, and again, I'll be hitting you up soon to get you back on for sure.
Hey, always glad to be here, man, and thank you for having me.
No doubt. That's the hip hop story. Hey, be safe out there, brother.
You too, man. Peace, bless, bro.